Welcome to the hostess city, where the cocktails are chilling, the dinners spirited, and the accommodations may just entice you to stay forever. So, are you a supernaturally curious travel enthusiast? Well, then you've come to the right place, because I am the ghost tourist, and this is Savannah, Georgia.
I caught a glimpse of something very weird. A ghost I fear is near me, dear. A ghost has slipped into my world, my world.
This special episode is for you literary and film buffs who, like me, read or watched Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil and became completely obsessed with the charming and oddball characters of Savannah, Georgia. So join me as I visit a few locations associated with the story, as well as Jim Williams himself. For those who don't know Jim Williams, he was a high-end antiques dealer, historical preservationist, and alleged murderer. More on that later. First, a bit of context about the town that he called home. Savannah is hauntingly beautiful and bursting full of ghostly tales. They say that's because the city has literally been built upon her dead. For centuries, as Savannah expanded, they simply covered over thousands of fallen soldiers, native peoples, slaves, and epidemic victims. And perhaps that is why it has been labeled the most haunted city in America. So Savannah is known as America's first planned city, and it was laid out with wide lanes around 24 squares, 22 of which still exist today, and they're all incredibly beautiful. As you continue to stroll past the mildewed magnolias and through the historic district, you'll find elegant Georgian mansions, grand Greek revivals, Federalist, Victorian, and Gothic marvels, framed by live oaks dripping Spanish moss. Once upon a time, Savannah rivaled Charleston as the South's busiest port, and this town had money to burn. But by the 1950s, it was a different tune. The city was struggling, and most of these grand structures sat crumbling until a group of determined women and one notorious man took it upon themselves to save them. Enter James Arthur Williams, more commonly known as Jim, a Georgia boy who came from nothing and built himself an empire. I'm standing in Monterey Square, and behind me is the Mercer Williams House, where infamous art dealer and fabulous party host Jim Williams once lived. It was here that he shot and killed Danny Hansford, his sometimes assistant, sometimes lover, a former male prostitute. Hansford was 21 at the time of his death and had a history of violent outbursts, arrests, and drug overdoses. On multiple occasions, Williams had bailed him out of jail or rushed him to the hospital, so their relationship was tumultuous, to say the least. The shooting of Danny Hansford occurred in May of 1981. Williams claimed self-defense, and the case ignited a media frenzy. He's still the only defendant on record to be tried in the state of Georgia 4 times for the same crime. But he was ultimately acquitted. The popular John Brent novel, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, was published in 1994 and featured Jim Williams' captivating story. The novel spent 260 weeks on the bestseller list, and of course, it was also adapted into a movie directed by Clint Eastwood, and the real house is in fact featured in the film. Though Jim Williams is best remembered for his neatly trimmed mustache, epic VIP Christmas parties, and headline-grabbing trials, he did play a paramount role in preserving Savannah's historic downtown. In his 35-year residency, Williams bought and restored over 60 houses, all of which he did at a financial loss. And, not surprisingly, quite a few of them have a reputation for being haunted, including this one. Jim Williams was an avid believer in the paranormal. He was so desperate to win his case that he hired a voodoo practitioner to aid in his defense. However, many believe that Danny Hansford's vengeful spirit claimed victory in the end. For only 9 months after his acquittal, Jim Williams' lifeless body was found mere inches away from the spot where Hansford had been shot dead. But the staff of the Mercer Williams House will inform you that he died in the foyer, which is technically inches away, 264 of them to be exact. As a result of this tumultuous past, the Mercer Williams House has quite a ghostly reputation. Though the current owner, Jim's niece, is tight-lipped about the paranormal activity, some members of the staff have reported disembodied voices, phantom footsteps, even full-bodied apparitions. And Jim's ghost has also been spotted by neighbors, especially around the time of his annual Christmas party. But he may not be the only spirit in residence. The Mercer House had a horrific reputation even before Jim Williams, when, in 1969, a young boy was chasing pigeons on the roof and fell to his death, impaling himself upon the fence. His name was Tommy Downs, and likely the fall alone could have killed him, but his fate was far more gruesome. The top spike, which has never been replaced, was lodged in his skull. Some have claimed to witness a replay haunting at this location, the boy's ghost caught in a traumatic loop of horror, forever falling. I did go inside on a house tour, and I highly recommend it. The place is filled with priceless antiques, oddities, and beautiful works of art, but they don't allow photography inside. So the staff suggest, if you're curious, then watch Return of the Swamp Thing, which was filmed months before Jim's passing and features almost every inch of the house, exactly how Jim had it. Well, maybe exactly the way Jim had it, with a few exceptions. The Mercer Williams House was completed in 1868 for General Hugh W. Mercer, the great-grandfather of celebrated songwriter Johnny Mercer. In Savannah tradition, most historic homes are named after the original family in addition to its most prominent resident. Thus, the Mercer Williams House will forever be a monument to notoriety. Hey! Remember to hit that subscribe button. Head 2 blocks south on Bull Street, and you'll find our second stop. This is Forsyth Park, one of the iconic filming backdrops for several scenes in the film. This beautiful 30-acre green space is filled with locals, tourists, and ultimate frisbee players. But what looks idyllic on the surface is actually hiding a very dark history right beneath your feet. Savannah is riddled with derelict, crumbling, and hidden underground tunnels, which were used for centuries for multiple purposes. Through these secret passageways moved stolen goods, illegal slaves, shanghaied sailors, bootlegged alcohol, and Savannah's dead. Specifically, these tunnels beneath Forsyth Park that ran to the Candler Hospital morgue, and they were used to transport the dead and disease-ridden outside of city limits. In times of yellow fever epidemic, it is said that the corpses were carried through the tunnels, then loaded onto horse-drawn carriages and buried in the dead of night. But during Savannah's largest yellow fever epidemic in 1876, the hospital was so overrun that bodies began to pile up underground. Eventually, the hospital decided it was easier to seal the tunnels and the corpses within than to relocate them. Thousands died in this time period, and rumors persist to this day that quite a few of them may lie sealed beneath Forsyth Park. And in case you weren't aware of how horrific it is to die of yellow fever, basically, all of your organs fail. You become jaundiced, your skin yellows, you vomit blood and black sludge, and to this day, there's no treatment. And back in the 1870s, there was the even greater terror that you'd be tossed into one of these death tunnels while still alive. So be forewarned. If you dare to wander the park after nightfall, you may just hear the anguished wails of the forlorn echoing across the fabric of time. After you've spent a few hours walking around, working up an appetite, step into Churchill's and grab a stool. Though the bar from the movie burned down, this one's a pretty close recreation. They serve British and Southern dishes, as well as craft cocktails and local beers. And if you're looking for a different kind of spirit, pop next door to Moon River Brewing Company, a location which many would call one of the most paranormally active in all of Savannah. Don't worry, I'll cover it in a future episode. Tonight, I booked a walking tour with Savannah Terrors. In this video, we'll focus on one particular haunted house associated with Jim Williams. But if you want to hear more of Min's tales, find my full-length Savannah episode on the channel.
So this place was owned by like one family all the way from 1830 to 1951.
This Regency home was built in 1819 and famously hosted the Marquis de Lafayette in 1825. It was then purchased by Congressman George Owens in 1830 and remained in his family until 1951, when his granddaughter Margaret Thomas gifted it to the Telfair Academy. Miss Margaret never married and didn't want vultures pecking over her things, so her only condition was that the museum be named after both her grandfather and father, and that they leave her bedroom unchanged. Visitors today will get to experience the dueling realities of wealth and slavery in the South, and perhaps an unexpected paranormal encounter. Some say this house has more ghosts per square foot than any other in the city. Most notable, of course, is Margaret herself, who occasionally enjoys some late-night gardening in her ethereal gray shawl and large hat. Inside the home, phantoms have been spotted smoking cigarettes, overturning chairs, pulling tablecloths, and walking through walls.
Jim Williams himself was visiting a friend here, and while they were here, they said they saw a man appear in the back of the room.
It was the 1960s, and the mysterious man was wearing a 19th century riding coat and ruffled shirt. Jim claimed that the ghost began to pace about the room, eventually coming so near he could see the beads of sweat upon his brow. The anxious spirit then passed through the couch and vanished right before their eyes. Jim, already a believer in the paranormal, made light of the experience, stating, "In Savannah, even the ghosts sweat." This last stop on the tour is a little outside of town, so we hopped in a lift. Welcome to Bonaventure Cemetery, which exploded in popularity when it was the garden featured in Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. It is utterly beguiling here. I can see why it's one of the most photographed cemeteries in the world. The cemetery was founded in 1846. Before that, it was a plantation. As the legend goes, one night there was a spectacular party going on when a butler came to inform the owner that the roof had caught fire. Rather than panic, the host moved the party out to the garden where they proceeded to make merry. They toasted the house as it burned to the ground and then threw their crystal glasses against the oak trees. John Berent recounted the tale in Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, stating, "Tradition has it that if you listen closely on quiet nights, you can still hear the laughter and the shattering of crystal." So this cemetery is enormous. It's over 160 acres. They offer a lot of driving tours, but I just really prefer to walk. It's so beautiful. Psychologists say if you want to live a happier life, contemplate death. And what a lovely place to just stroll around and contemplate mortality. However, as you walk, you won't find Jim, Danny, or the iconic bird girl statue featured on the book's cover. Danny Hansford is buried nearby in Greenwich Cemetery. Jim Williams was interred in Gordon, Georgia, the town that he was born in. And that iconic bird girl statue? Well, she's in the Jepson Center for the Arts. And in case this wasn't enough Midnight in the Garden for you, they are currently adapting it into a Broadway musical. Hey, if you enjoyed the episode, please consider joining my Patreon community. For only $5 a month, you can support the channel's growth and get all kinds of exclusive bonus content like episode-inspired cocktail recipes and travel itineraries, so you can follow in my footsteps, if you dare. Find me on Patreon. I'll see you next time.
A ghost has slipped into my world.